everyone. Welcome to a super exhausted bonus episode, but it's going to be a great one because I've got a lot of questions here submitted from listeners. But first, we're going to hear a very special interview with Lala Wu, a co-founder of Sister District, an essential organization on the front lines of fighting for our democracy. They organize people to get out the vote on the all-important state level, and we're going to be doing a phone bank with them on this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. It's a Halloween phone bank with Gaslit Nation and Sister District. I will be there in costume, obviously, and we're going to be making phone calls to get out the vote in Virginia, where posh Trump, Glenn Youngkin, just try to be sneaky by scrubbing people off the voter rolls who are totally eligible to vote. So he's trying to win more seats in the state chambers so that he can then have a veto-proof majority and just pass a bunch of right-wing laws and change the very fabric of Virginia and push it more on the path of Ohio and Missouri. And that's very scary, not just for the quality of life and the quality of education and other public services across Virginia and the environmental protections and reproductive health care, because one of the first things they're going to do is ban reproductive freedom for people, okay? Where that's going to endanger lives and it's just a nightmare. And this isn't hysteria. This isn't me being dramatic. This is really the same far-right debacle that is creating a big mess in states like Missouri and Ohio. This could, Youngkin, if he wins state control in these all-important state races in Virginia this November, could really do a lot of damage in a short period of time to really move Virginia more in that direction, okay? So let's not be sleeping on Virginia. I know there's a lot going on in the world, but we're going to stay grounded because I'm telling you, if I could put it on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker, the theme of the show is there is no substitute for political power. There is no substitute for political power. The reason why Netanyahu is carrying out his long-awaited genocide, pleasing the genocidal political movement that brought him to power, and carrying out his long-awaited prize of wiping out the Palestinians, is because he built the political power to do so. He built the ruling coalition to do so. There is no substitute for political power. They, on the far right, the extremists, are building political power, so we have no choice but to build it ourselves. And so I'm tired as hell. You know, if you're watching this video on YouTube or on Patreon, you're going to see I haven't showered today. My hair's got that glistening oily sheen, which actually makes my hair kind of look healthy, I think. But so I'm really tired. I'm going to still make my phone calls. I'm grieving. I'm going to still make my phone calls. It's not going to be easy. I'm going to do what I have the capacity to do. I'm going to help. I'm not going to allow the chaos of this world, the grief of this world, to stop me from putting in even a small effort to fight for political power, because that's the only way we win. That's the only way we win. And so in this very important interview, you're going to hear all about Virginia, what we need to pay attention to there, and the wonderful phone bank we're going to be doing together on Thursday, October 26th, virtual. It's going to be virtual at 6 p.m. Eastern. I will be there. Come in costume, don't come in costume. I will be in costume, whether it's Halloween or not, because I love phone banking, because it does make a difference, and it's very therapeutic. It's fun. So now you're going to hear the interview with Lala Wu, the co-founder of Sister District. After that interview, I'm going to be banging through some questions from Gaslit Nation supporters who subscribe to the show on Patreon at the Democracy Defender level or higher. If you want to join that community, join the conversation, just sign up there, and I'm going to be going through your questions. It's such an honor to be here with you. It's groups like Sister District and organizers like yourself that I turn to for guidance on what's going on in our country, any sort of signs of shifts and how people are thinking and feeling on the ground, because I know that is your job, to pay attention to that and respond to it and fight like hell for our democracy on the all-important state level. And so I wanted to just ask you, though, as a woman, fighting on the front lines of against fascism and what Glenn Youngkin, posh Trump, as I call him, is trying to do in Virginia by banning reproductive health care, essentially, and rolling back environmental protections and just a long list of bad stuff. How did you get here? Where did you come from? and so tell us, because there's so many organizers, people that are just fighting arm in arm with us, and I'd love to hear your story.
Thanks. Well, I'm so glad to be here and honored to be here with you. It is remarkable to reflect on, the moment that we are in. And I've been doing this for, 7 years now. And so it all got started, when I was sitting with my friends watching the election returns come in 2016. And I'm sure you, like your listeners, remember that moment where you first realized you were not watching the election of our first female president, but instead were watching the election of a celebrity lunatic. And it was so devastating. And in so many ways, we felt confused and sad and frightened and also really helpless. And as we stumbled home that night and found our ways, into each other's feeds and conversations again in the morning, looking for a way that we could make a difference, this helplessness was something that felt very strong, especially for my community in California, where I live. There's this sense that, well, okay, my legislators, Nancy Pelosi doesn't need my help. California is pretty blue. I should say as an aside, there's plenty of issues that California needs to solve as well, but that's for a different podcast. But to make an impact on the national stage, it felt there was nowhere to turn to. Where do we go to make an impact? So I was lucky enough to come together with four other women at that time, all new to politics, and actually happened to be mostly lawyers like myself. And also, we're mostly strangers. We met on Facebook as friends of friends, but we came together around this idea of connecting resources where they are with where they are most needed. So, and we saw very quickly that where they could be most strategic was in state legislatures. So, 7 years ago, I was a lawyer practicing environmental land use clean energy law. I thought I was going to be continuing to do that for some time. Then the earthquake of the 2016 election happened, and we saw that this idea was really gaining traction, that this idea of connecting people to opportunities to make a difference in these state legislative races was something that people really wanted and needed to do. So we've been focused on state legislatures ever since the very beginning of our organization. And, we support them in a lot of different ways. Every year we try to build a portfolio of states where we can flip a chamber, hold a chamber, make inroads into badly gerrymandered states. And of course, we focus on democracy battlegrounds like Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And this year, there's incredibly important elections happening in Virginia.
Did you go to Women's March in 2017, I think it was?
Yes, absolutely. I did go to the Women's March, and it was incredible to feel that kind of solidarity and community with people, not just women, but people from all over the country that were standing up and saying, this is not who represents us. This is not who won the popular vote. This is not who we want to be in office. And I think I've been thinking about that a little bit, just with all of the recent news, just trying to remember how important it is to distinguish who's in power in a country with the people in it. So yes, absolutely attended the Women's March, and that kind of energy, that kind of, we don't know exactly how we're doing it, but we're going to do something, is exactly the kind of energy that we've brought to Sister District and that we've built and continue to build, and to be curious and humble and strategic. And at this point, this far in, we feel just a tremendous have a lot of experience and clarity of purpose about what needs to be done to help to save democracy using these state legislatures as building blocks.
Absolutely. And I'm asked about Women's March because even after that massive showing, Women's March was one of the largest marches in the world. And even after that, there were white men, pundits on TV, in cable news, laughing at us as though we were, just wearing a bunch of knitted pussies on our heads, whatever the fuck they were saying. But it was like they were just laughing it off. But the reality was, it was a huge, energizing moment. And so many organizers like yourself were there. and women that would go on to run for office and win were there. People don't understand that demonstrations are an important part of the work that we do. Visibility, like showing up and demanding a livable future, is so important in the work that we all do, and we find each other through that work and we get energized through it. So I wanted just to make it clear that part of your historic story in building a new America and building a sustainable, livable America, free America, is Women's March was very much part of your political DNA, like it was for so many of us. And yeah, I'm just taking a historical record of that for the white men pundits who think they're going to be the ones writing the historical record of this moment. No, it's us right here.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, something you're alluding to is so important, that there are different parts to the strategy to save our democracy. And a big part of it is visibility, showing our strength and flexing that muscle to the general public, to those in power, to make sure they understand that we are watching and we are listening and we're not sitting back. And then also, we need to win elections. And then also once we win elections, folks need to know how to govern. And then, there's also grassroots movements that need to stay strong all year round, 365 days a year. So the list goes on, but, all of these strategies are important and they have to work together. And it's not that one is better than another. They really, really need to have that kind of connection, as you're saying.
Trillion%. So let's talk about the states you're focused on. We're going to be doing a phone bank with you, a phone bank party, Halloween themed. I'll be in costume. I'll be there. And so we're focused on Virginia. So Virginia, my folks live in Virginia. It's like a second home. So I need a safe space. I want to live in a blue state and go visit my family in a blue state. And Virginia could very easily slip into the path that Ohio has taken, and Missouri before Ohio. So we shouldn't take any so-called blue state for granted. What are the stakes in Virginia?
Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, at the moment, Virginia isn't blue. Virginia turned blue in 2019 with the help of Sister District, as well as so many organizations on the ground. And the voters of Virginia said, we want something different. We don't want to break from our past where Republicans have ruled the day. And we want a progressive future, and one that stands for our values. So that was tremendous in 2019. Like, I want to start with a little bit of that good news for context, that, because Virginia in particular has a very strong grassroots, community-based movement culture there. And this organization, New Virginia Majority in particular, has been so skillful and so diligent and so disciplined at organizing its voters, working class people of color, young people, women, year over year for over the last decade. And has done such a tremendous job of building up that strong voter base that laid the groundwork for the electoral flips that we saw in 2019 and gaining a trifecta for the first time in over 30 years. So with that, tremendous victory came forth incredible progressive legislation. We had, they're passing their own Voting Rights Act and expanding the right to vote, legalizing recreational marijuana, abolishing the death penalty, becoming the, only state in the South to do so. And the list goes on and on. But these are the kinds of positive impacts that can happen with a blue state. Now, unfortunately, the current state of play is that in 2021, Governor Youngkin, the Republican, won the governorship, and then Democrats also lost the House of Delegates. So we are now in a position where Virginia is the only state in the South that has not passed a post-Roe ban on abortion. So it's the only state in the South without an extremist abortion ban right now, making it incredibly important, not just for the people in the state, but also for the region. But the only thing that's standing in the way of Governor Youngkin from banning abortion, from passing anti-LGBTQ legislation, from installing far-right culture warriors at these statewide posts controlling education, health, voting, etc. The only thing standing in his way is a single seat majority we have in the state Senate. Just one seat. That's it. And it's very scary. And so the state Senate is an absolute must win. We have to defend and hopefully expand that majority. And then in the state House, we just need to win 3 seats to flip the state House. And then we'll be in a very, very strong position when the governor's mansion is up again in 2025 for us to take back a trifecta in 2025. But we have to stay focused on really what the stakes are this year, which are abortion, climate, guns, democracy itself. The list goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you find is effective in phone banking? Like, who are we going to be talking to at our phone bank party? And I'm going to keep making phone calls with you guys. I have a lot of anger, I have a lot of grief, and I'm going to channel it into phone banking. So what coaching do you give? What do you find works?
Yes, I love how you talked about channeling that because as our volunteers have often said to us, it's cheaper than therapy, to get involved and to volunteer and to really find a productive outlet for all of the ways that we're feeling. So thank you for phone banking with us. To all of you who are going to do it, phone banking can be a lot of fun. And so when you come to a sister district phone bank, whether you're an expert or you're brand new to it, there's 30 minutes of training at the top. It's interactive. It talks about why it is that we phone bank, what success looks like, and some tips for getting it done, what to expect. And what you can expect is that we're calling voters, especially at this stage, this GOTV, get out the vote phase of the election, we're calling voters who are already likely to support us, to support Democrats, to support our candidates that we're calling for. So these are generally going to be pretty friendly calls. And what they are is hey, we're just reminding you that there's an election happening. Do you have a plan to vote? And then making a vote plan with them, because the research shows that people might have a vague sense of, oh, yes, I'll vote if I get around to it, or I would like to vote. That seems like good to me. But really helping people visualize and articulate a plan for, okay, what time of day are you going to go? Are you going to drive there or do you get a ride? Are you going to bring anybody with you? Do you know where your polling location is? Who's going to take care of your kids during that time? Etc. All of these different kinds of things. Just kind of articulating a little bit of a plan goes a really, really long way in ensuring that voters actually turn out. So that is going to be a big part of what these conversations are like, and really they are a lot of fun. You're going to talk to some voters who don't know where their polling place is, and they're going to be really grateful that you are able to tell them. You're going to talk to some voters who might have a vague impression of the candidate, but because you'll be able to use the talking points that we offer and say, well, this is what this candidate stands for, and this is why you should vote for them. It's a lot of fun to actually have these live conversations with folks who are going to be defending our democracy by the very act of going out and voting.
And which candidates in Virginia are the most vulnerable? Like, who do you need us to be calling? Because we're going to call some at our phone bank party with Gaslit Nation. And then I need to know for myself, because I expanded my childcare for the month of October. So I can have time to make these phone calls. And so who do you want me making calls for like, which candidates?
Yes. So the partnership phone bank that we all have coming up is going to be calling for a couple of the top tier candidates at that time that we most need support for. I don't know exactly who's going to be on that call yet, but what I can tell you is I can give you a little sampling of the kinds of phone calls that we'll be making for what kinds of candidates. So one example is Schuyler Van Valkenburg. He's currently a delegate in the Richmond suburbs in Virginia, and he is running for the state Senate. He is running against this woman is really something else. She's actually an OBGYN, but she's trying to parlay that into some softness, but really she wants to ban abortion and has extreme views on it as well. And so this is a really, really competitive and important race, and one where, because of the opponent's incumbent advantage, she's already in the seat that Schuyler is challenging, and also because she's a woman and an OBGYN, there's a sense that she's she is trying to use that as an argument for why she's actually a moderate. But like so many Republicans in Virginia, she's a faux moderate. She's a fake moderate. And it's very, very important for us to draw that distinction. And that's something that we can do in these phone calls.
So she's an OBGYN that doesn't care about reproductive health care.
Yes, it's really, you can't make this stuff up. It's incredible. So that's one example. Another example is our incredible candidate that we've supported in the past, Danica Rome. She is made history by being the first out transgender state legislator. And she also her trademark is to really drill in on the local issues that people really care about, that really make a difference in everyday lives. If your parents live in Virginia, then, the traffic is a big deal. Who's taking care of this park, or what's teacher pay like? These are the local issues that state legislatures control, and that Danica has been so good at staying focused on. She has a background as a local journalist, and so really has that kind of mindset as well.
Is she in danger? Is she in extra danger because of how the trans genocidal rhetoric has been normalized across the right and in the echo chamber of the right, and including on the presidential? Nikki Haley normalizes genocidal language towards trans people and so on. So do you see an uptick that they're targeting her?
Yes, absolutely. I just saw a really chilling video where she was in a debate with her opponent, and she had to deal with a heckler who was,
Wow.
I can't repeat them here, just repeating the most vile things about her, attacking her personally, attacking her because she is trans. It was very, very hard to listen to, and then the woman, the heckler, was ushered out. And the way that Danica responded was so incredible and just reminded me why we support her, because it was so even keeled and full of integrity, and just said, look, like, we have my constituents. She's a delegate now. She's running for Senate. My constituents are so diverse. We want everybody here to thrive, and we need to lead with compassion and love and not hate. And so, yes, it's really taking a toll on her personally, I'm sure, but then also on the campaign trail, and all of this rhetoric that's happening. These campaigns, of course, don't happen in a vacuum.
Great. So, so she's going to get our support then at the phone bank party.
Yes, we'll be calling for the candidates that our political team has told us are the ones who.
It's moment to moment need. It's however the numbers are looking in that moment. So wherever you need us, we'll go. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, exactly.
Are you guys doing door knocking? Because I could drive down to my parents in Virginia and do some door knocking.
We absolutely are. We would love to have you. Where are your parents located in Virginia?
I don't want to say, but they're there in a nice cozy home. But so the thing is, though, would people concerned about COVID, if they want to go door knocking, could they wear a mask? Is that okay to do?
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely. We love door knockers. We are in the midst of coordinating a number of trips from our teams across the country, but especially on the East Coast, where it's a little bit easier to get to Virginia. But we've got a bunch of people who are getting in cars and getting on buses and going to Virginia and knocking on doors. And if folks are interested, we would absolutely love to have you. You can just email us at info@sisterdistrict.com, and we'll find a way to plug you in.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And so what are you hearing on the ground? Because what I love about local organizing is that we're a lot more alike than we are different. I know there's the people you described are deplorable, as Hillary Clinton would call them, but accurately so. But do you have a sense that beyond the media hype, that a lot more Americans are awake to the threats to our democracy than maybe comes through in the media chambers?
Yes, absolutely. I think that that message is really coming through that, we can see what's happening with the House speakership fight at the federal level and how extremists really don't care about keeping our democracy intact and are subverting that to their own personal gain. And these kinds of tendencies absolutely exist at the state legislative level as well. I was just looking at a New York Times article from a few days ago that talked about how in 2021, the last time there were state legislative elections in Virginia, there are these conservative activists that are now still working in this year, working to train up grassroots conservative activists to be poll watchers, to gum up the works, to be as intimidating as possible to people conducting election administration, and how there has been this movement to elect those kinds of election deniers and extremists to these positions that get to decide when elections are held, and how easy it's going to be for voters to access the polls. There have been 10 counties in Virginia that have canceled Sunday voting, which is a direct attack on Black voters who often vote through souls to the polls and have a habit and a tradition of voting on those days. And so it's really the full display of MAGA is happening in our state legislatures, and I think that message is coming through, and we can see that represented in some kind of concrete ways. Democratic candidates this year have really been doing a tremendous job outraising their Republican counterparts and have a cash advantage, which is really promising. Unfortunately, Governor Youngkin is himself, of course, extremely wealthy and has also pulled in $7 million just this quarter, for his leadership PAC. So he's got that money that we anticipate he may well deploy in support of all of the Republican candidates as we approach the election. That's kind of straight out of the Republican playbook to flood the zone with late
dark money.
Yes, exactly.
And also, Youngkin was trying to scrub, or he did scrub the voter rolls. He pushed people off the voter rolls, and
Yes.
I know that there was a big outcry against that, and there was a call on Merrick Garland's DOJ to do something about it. Good luck with that.
Yes.
So tell us about that, and where does that stand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reports are really alarming that all of these voters were purged incorrectly. Basically, it happened that these were folks with probation violations, not new felony convictions. And so the rules are such that they should have stayed on the voter rolls, but instead they were purged. And the numbers are unclear, and but the impact and the psychological chilling effect also is apparent. That it's obvious that this has a disproportionate impact on certain populations who are already systemically and kind of structurally disenfranchised. And so there needs to be immediate attention to this issue and more investigation. And unfortunately, what's really distressing is that even if it turns out that Youngkin was, and which it looks like it is, that Youngkin's administration made some grave mistakes, even if there was malice or whether it was inadvertent or not, regardless, this is going to have an impact on the election. The election is not going to wait until this gets sorted out. The election is going to happen regardless. And that means there's going to be a lot of people who have a right to vote who are not going to be able to vote in this election.
So how do we get them to vote? Can they just sign affidavits at the polls, or what happens there?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do would be, iwillvote.org.com is a very good resource for better understanding what your resources are. If you have questions, there's a helpline. I would say that's my best advice, is to seek out resources. There are some out there to help people navigate the very, very complicated system that exists state by state, and unfortunately is kind of by design to make it hard for people to vote.
I will vote.org. I give that website out all the time when I phone bank. I will vote.org. All right, everyone, join me at the phone bank party with Sister District on Thursday. I'll be there live wearing my Halloween costume. And then you can join me to make calls through Election Day. When is Election Day, Lala?
Election Day is Tuesday, November 7th.
Oh my God, it's right around the corner.
It's so soon. It's so soon. And, the election has already started. Early voting started in Virginia last month. And so people have been voting. Voters are voting. The early vote is so important. And so getting people to turn in those ballots, people can vote by absentee in Virginia, getting that early vote in, which is what you'll be helping to do as you make these phone calls, is so critical for making sure that we've got that strong wall in place for when that dark money and that late money comes in.
And if we hold the line in Virginia and we deny Youngkin the state power he needs, state government control he needs, the Republican majority that he needs, I should be precise, then we protect reproductive health care, meaning we protect pregnant people's health. And on top of that, we lay the groundwork to help turn Virginia blue in 2024 in Electoral College. And so it's a really important fight right now. I hope you'll join me for it. And thank you, Lala Wu of Sister District. Thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, everyone, so let's get through some questions. I know it's been a busy time. So David writes in, just back from the UK, and my friend set me off while driving to York one Sunday morning. So what's happening with Trump? By the end of my reply, 10 minutes later, I was almost yelling, this is not normal. This is not normal. The UK press, 80% owned by fascist, non-resident billionaires, Murdoch and Viscount Rothmere, and Saudi and Qatari theocrats and relatives of KGB agents, just covers a general sense of, quote, Biden's a bit of a dodder, eh? He's too old and has done nothing, eh? This is combined with nothing of real substance on Trump's treason, as indicated in his 91 felony charges. It's Halloween and here we are again, where you are in the movie and only you know what is happening, and it doesn't matter how hard you shake people. Wake up for God's sake. Okay, the opening guest fascist from Australia. If you search COVID, quote, Black Death feudalism, you will find plenty of scholarly articles on why the Black Death was instrumental in the demise of European feudalism. I'm sure you can find a plethora of articles on how today's American corporatism, where within the walls of the business, democracy and justice are suspended to keep the serfs in line and the profits flowing to the landowners and barons. And God forbid you try to change companies for better conditions. In another form of feudalism. And add this to efforts in the US and now blatantly in the UK to abolish or reduce the inheritance tax, and you have all the ingredients for a pre-1215, pre-1353 society. An accessible fictional account of the Black Death and the feudal society it helped end is Ken Follett's World Without End. The restart of union activity after decades of persecution, from the day Reagan fired the ATCs, the work-from-home revolution in working conditions, and the shift in some power back to those of us who sell our labor, is a result of the COVID pandemic. A whole generation of workers now deciding what is important and taking that new perspective out into the world and onto the streets. The feudal overlords are afraid, and that's what his face from Australia was showing there. Okay, so David, so you're referring to the Australian businessman who said that the workers deserve to be massively unemployed and that people need to feel the pain and they haven't felt the pain yet, and you got to really smash the workers because that's the only way you can get any respect out of them. Yeah, that's the overlords, the oligarchs and the wannabe oligarchs. Yeah, they're running scared now. So now let's get to your questions. Comparing the end of feudalism after the Black Death and the Renaissance for unionism after the pandy, what are the Renaissance for unions after the pandemic? What are the concrete and meaningful signs that the people are really throwing off this new feudal yoke? And how do we know we have done enough? I think we're just at the start at rebuilding American democracy by creating economic justice. The big genocidal, ongoing genocide of non-white people today, black people, because redlining is still going on, right? Redlining. The prison military industrial complex is growing, right? You have Cop City in Georgia, that other cop cities are breaking ground in other southern states and so on. So what is at the heart of the ongoing genocide against non-white people that built the United States? Economic injustice, a lack of opportunities. That's why they want to get rid of affirmative action, which they did. That's why they want to defund public schools and fund the cops. And so the way we fight back, the white workers, along with everyone else, is through building unions, through normalizing building unions, through having conversations openly about how to normalizing all the assets or the knowledge of how to unionize and how to fight the internal intimidation that can come up in daring to challenge your managers and your very livelihood and so on. So this whole, and we're gonna have more episodes on this coming up, and so we're just at the start of what you're describing here as a post-pandemic. We've hit rock bottom. Enough is enough. We need to now rebuild our power and fight like hell with our grassroots power to demand greater equality in our systems. And so the core of all that is economic justice. And the way we know that we're making headway is if we start to see an increase in the average life expectancy in the U.S., which has been on the decline. And when we start to see a decline in the extremely high levels of income inequality that are up there with the age of the robber barons. So those are the two indicators. The average life expectancy in the U.S. rising, but it's been on decline just like it has been in Russia, a deeply corrupt and deeply poor country. And what was the other one? The other one I mentioned, income inequality shrinking. The gap is historic levels. And we're not going to get there without unions, normalizing unions. We're not going to get there without also modernizing the United States government. The United States government is very old and dusty and rickety. There are physical examples of that, like Mitch McConnell and the corpse of Dianne Feinstein, all respect to her, but they full on kept a living dead, like a person that was dying in the Senate. All right, that just shows you what a farce this aging system of our Congress is. Like, it needs an upgrade. It needs modernization. We cannot be held hostage to one asshole in West Virginia like Joe Manchin. We cannot be held hostage by Tommy Tuberville, who I don't even think he understands what he's doing anymore. Like, he's so far gone and is far right. I understand it's part of his larger libertarian, dark money funded, Russian-aligned movement to try to stop the U.S. government and to try to stop, to do what the Reagan Revolution set out to do, which was drown government in a bathtub. I understand all that. It's part of this larger movement, right? But it's ridiculous. It's outdated. And the new generation of leaders coming in, and I don't want to be ageist because it's not like, it's just, I'm talking about metaphors of our system, right? The great American experiment that was founded, it was imperfect from the start. It was founded with the belief that they're living up to John Lockean ideas of universal equality, never mind women and people who are enslaved. And so we've had to fight for the reality of making that those universal equality philosophies real, like actually implementing them in reality. And that's the history of America, what built this country. And as an extension of that, it's now time to modernize the U.S. government. And looking at that, like chipping away, getting rid of the Electoral College, what is the game plan there? How could that realistically be done? Court reform. There's a legislation out by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who's been a big voice on looking at all the dark money and how it corrupts the court, including, of course, the Harlan Crow captured, the puppet Clarence Thomas on a string Supreme Court. And so Senator Whitehouse and others are putting forth legislation to try to have term limits for Supreme Court justices, which I think is a brilliant idea. I think we should also expand the court because that's normally done. It has been done throughout our history. So there's things that we need to do to just modernize, just upgrade, like any system needs upgrades. And that's happened throughout the history of our country, and we're long overdue for one. So I'm going to be looking into doing a series on that, especially as we get closer to the 2024 election. So more on that. Your second question from David. Totally unrelated, I noted with dismay the realpolitik of the G20 declaration on Ukraine. No blame for Russia, no mention of support for Ukraine, nothing. Was this important for the ongoing solidarity for Ukraine support, or is it a sign of Western weakness or growing disunity on Ukraine? There's fresh data even that the Czechs have a Russian asset leading their election, or had been a leader in that election, or was it simply realpolitik so as not to piss off the Indian hosts of G20? Is Biden now backing away from Ukraine with his eyes on 2024? Yeah, I was really disappointed to see how watered down the G20 statement was as far as Ukraine was concerned. And of course, India being a close ally of Russia, India is benefiting from that cheap Russian gas. It's a cheap Russian oil. India is still buying up Russian oil. And they have a nationalistic government. So, of course, it's going to be aligned with other nationalistic governments like Russia. So you could blame it on that. But I think, and I think that's sort of where the blame would lie most in this situation, because Biden's foreign policy team has actually come through in a big way for Ukraine. Even Jake Sullivan, who I've called out relentlessly on this show, maybe that worked. Maybe somebody sent it to him. I don't know. We have had members of Congress and their staff reach out to us, over the years. So maybe we got through to Jake Sullivan together. But Jake Sullivan was part of Biden's foreign policy team that finally approved long-range missiles at ATACMS or whatever, ATACMS for Ukraine. And Ukraine has used them to great effect. And that was a really big deal. And I know there's a lot of anxiety now for Ukraine supporters, whether the massive humanitarian crisis, the genocide of Palestinians, and all of that whole war threatening to break out into a larger regional war. I know there's concern that Ukraine is going to get lost in this, and that it's going to divert the world's attention, and that Ukraine may not get the resources it needs. And of course, the chaos in the House, where Ukraine, and all of that chaos we're experiencing with business being shut down in the House is because of Ukraine aid. Matt Gaetz and the eight traitors to our country. Matt Gaetz, a longtime Kremlin disinformation agent. It just took eight of them to shut down the House, and which of course is a threat to shutting down our government when the money runs out in November. And that was all over Ukraine aid. Let's not forgetting that was over Ukraine aid. And very consistent with Matt Gaetz being a Kremlin disinformation mouthpiece. And but I think the hope is that, as we're going to go into in future episodes, it's very clear, given how close Russia is to Hamas, given how close Russia is to Iran, which funds Hamas, that I think anybody who's worth anything in foreign policy can look at the current war in Israel, where Bibi Netanyahu, a close ally of Putin's, who full on campaigned with giant billboards of himself shaking Putin's hand, okay? I think it's within the realm of possibility that the global democratic alliance is going to, at the very least, consider the possibility that Russia had something to do with the Hamas attack. At the very least, I don't care where your position is on Israel, Palestine. Anybody that understands how Russia's warfare works and how Hamas has been taking trips to Russia, recently, and how close Russia is with Iran. If Russia benefits from something going on as it currently does with this current war, because it takes Ukraine out of newspapers and out of the media's attention and provides cover for Russian war crimes in Ukraine while we're all distracted, it also stretches America's resources on the foreign policy team extremely thin, which is something that happened under President Obama, which allowed Russia to sneak up on Obama and bring Trump to power. We've talked about that in more detail than that many times on the show. And anytime you're stretched thin, you're ultimately more vulnerable. So the thinking is that the great humanitarian need and the threat of a regional war is going to pull the Democratic Alliance, their attention, their resources off of Ukraine enough for Russia to make its move and win back an advantage it currently does not have. Because this timing of Hamas's attack is amazing for Russia. You're on the losing end. You have Ukraine making big advances, and then suddenly this Hamas attack breaks out. And so if Russia did not play an active role in that attack, and I'm not saying they did, they have had meetings with Hamas recently. And I will say for the third time now, they're extremely dependent on Hamas's major backer, Iran, to fund their own war machine in Ukraine. So at the very least, it's within the realm of possibility that Russia at the very least gave its blessing, or had its intelligence, right, know what was happening and be like, and know that this is something they could work to their advantage. At the very least, they're going to work it to their advantage, okay? No one can argue with that because they're Russia. They're Russia, and they will work this tragedy to their advantage. And I think the Global Democratic Alliance understands that. And they know that if they want to stay steadfast in Ukraine and achieve the collective goal that benefits the world of weakening Russia's genocidal war machine, that they will have to stick by Ukraine in thick and thin. And you already have European leaders saying that flat out. No, the war in Israel, the crisis there will not take us away from Ukraine. Ukraine will win. We're committed to Ukraine no matter what. And So I do trust Biden foreign policy team's commitment to Ukraine, and even if Russia stands to benefit from the crisis in the Middle East, which it absolutely is, and that'll be something we'll talk about more later in future episodes because it deserves a deeper dive discussion. And in terms of Biden and U.S. foreign policy on the recent trip to Israel and the ongoing horrific genocide in Gaza and what happened with the hospital bombing, we're going to go into that the next episode as things unfold. If you want to know what happened with the hospital bombing that everyone's debating, in my view, it's just a distraction from the larger story, which is the fact that by Israel's own admission, 6,000 bombs have rained on an area just twice the size of Washington, D.C. And if you paid close attention to the last episode, in that episode, you hear a doctor in Gaza, in a clip published by Doctors Without Borders, saying very plainly that his hospital was given 2 hours to evacuate by Israeli forces. 2 hours. Have you ever been in a hospital? How do you evacuate a hospital in 2 hours? That itself is a war crime. That should be a war crime. It's like you're targeting a hospital. You're targeting a hospital. So Israel, yes, has been known to target hospitals. Israel, yes, has bombed buildings that housed journalists like the AP and Al Jazeera. So, the whole forensics of what happened, independent verification is key, and we're going to get it as time goes on. But the reality is that the war crimes, the blatant genocide is very clearly being carried out by Israel right now. And this whole debate over hospital bombing is just muddled distraction, okay? The larger story is the fact that people desperate to take shelter, clinging to a hospital, trying to get in for their own safety, were killed. And we could say, well, that was a rocket on the Palestinian side and so on. But the reality is that when you are raining 6,000 bombs in such a small area, does it really matter at that point, like, whose bomb it was that killed those civilians? Like, just ceasefire now. My entire point can be summed up as this: simply ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now. And we're going to go more into all that in the next episode. So next question is, Grinzier, isn't mass violence just another way to say civil war? Also, from what I see, it's pretty much already here, unfortunately. Between the school shootings and other mass shootings, the constant flow of threats towards scientists, journalists, teachers, doctors, and politicians just saw that some senators didn't vote to convict Trump at the second impeachment just because they're worried about the threats they will receive. Yeah, absolutely. 1,000,000,000%. And Jim Jordan, right? He's using all those Trumpian dictatorship threats. Like, they're big. He's got some Republican extremists on his own side who are getting their lives threatened. Yeah, so that's violence, and that's how authoritarians do it. So, yeah, very good comment there. Thank you. So then Sarah writes in, should I be armed regularly? I'm a 45-year-old woman with an 8-year-old. Well, I would be very careful with that because, I've gone to a shooting range plenty of times in my day. I would not want guns around in my home. I would not, especially if I had children. And one of the worst statistics in America are how kids just happen upon unlocked guns. So I personally would not. I think there's other ways to protect yourself. and I personally would not carry a gun, but maybe others feel differently with training and keeping it locked up, but I just wouldn't trust that. Amanda writes, I'm truly concerned about how so many people have gravitated to Zuckerberg's Threads. To be on there, you have to be on Instagram. So Zuckerberg gets our data on 2 platforms. What do you all think about this? Very interesting question. So when we just posted our most recent episode on really dedicated looking at the history of Palestine and the Palestinian genocides and what's going on there now, when that episode first posted on Instagram, we shared it there, and the very first comment was hidden by Instagram. And I thought, oh, that's odd. Why would they? I've never seen that before in all the years of doing the show, that they would hide a comment. And so I clicked a button to see what the hidden comment was. And it was just a nice lady who, really with a really friendly looking profile on Instagram, who simply wrote a comment saying, thank you. She wrote, thank you. Her comment wasn't, she didn't have even any curse words. She wasn't debating. There was nothing aggressive there. She simply wrote, thank you. And Instagram's AI or whatever automatically just set it to censor. And then I noticed a drop of engagement. Like, we went from having pretty high engagement to the posts maintaining low engagement. So I thought, oh dear, we're shadow banned on Instagram. I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg at all for so many reasons, and we've gone through all of them on this show. So I know that Threads is becoming very seductive because it favors the media elite. There's something weird about it where a lot of the media elite were able to jump there instantly, and it's something with the algorithm where they're able to just shoot up and get their following back. And so maybe that's part of the engineering of the seduction of pulling people off of Twitter. Maybe they had some algorithm knowing how to do that, or some recruitment tool to deliberately designed that way to steal all the big voices off of Twitter and put them on Threads. And yeah, no, I don't want to be on any of these other places. I appreciate that everyone's so vocal on Patreon and that people are commenting and engaging each other on Patreon. I just had a meeting with a Patreon supporter. We're talking about finding ways to connect everyone, maybe doing local meetups, especially as we get closer to the election. And because I've met the CEO of Patreon. He came out to my neighborhood when I was about to have a baby. I've met him on 2 occasions. He really took a genuine interest in what we're doing. And he and his staff have been so supportive. They've even assigned a staffer in the San Francisco headquarters to help us should anything happen. And we can meet with this person regularly to find out about different features and things. So as we get closer to the election, I'm going to see what we can roll out to better connect each other. The only thing really limiting me is bandwidth. I'm really in the thick of it in terms of the hardest years of parenting with having little babies, right? The potty training, the big emotions, my big emotions. I'm really, anybody that has ever raised children, this is the years that try men's souls, women's souls, and I'm there. So as my kids get older, which is right around the corner, knock on wood, we'll do more and more fun stuff. But right now, I love how everyone's engaging on Patreon and leaving questions and answering each other's questions, and it's really, really nice to see. And so I feel safe on Patreon for now. And in terms of these other places, I'm posting there the show because that's where people are. And I'm not thrilled about it, given the ownership of those other sites, except for Mastodon, and I think Spoutable's fine. We'll continue that conversation because it's still early days on that. RJ, let's see. No, hold on. Who's next? Robin. Okay, Robin writes, my question is whether Netanyahu's intelligence system is really as bad as all that, or did he allow the Hamas planning to slip through with plausible deniability in order to create a Pearl Harbor moment? The latter would benefit him, as it can at least temporarily unite coalitions against Hamas and the Palestinians more broadly, distracting from his autocratic power grabs while he disembowels the government. Yeah, I think I agree with that assessment because he's an indicted corrupt criminal, and his whole MO has been clinging on to power through this abject power move of trying to gut this Israel Supreme Court. And it's deliberate because his accountability as a wannabe strongman in using the Trumpian tactics of aligning himself closely with Putin, of playing these culture war games, of turning Israelis against each other, creating an overall toxic environment, having a really puggish, nasty wife like a Melania Trump. I remember when Sarah Netanyahu went with her husband to Ukraine many years ago. It was like on some state visit. It was still during this war, of course, but not before. It was before the total genocide broke out in February 2022. But I remember Sarah Netanyahu was given this traditional piece of Ukrainian bread. It's like, that's what they do. Like, Ukrainians come out in traditional dress with bread and salt. It's like a blessing to their guest, welcoming them. And instead of, eating the piece of bread or politely holding it, she just dropped it, made a grimace, a nasty face, and like just treated it like trash. Just a really, really and Ukrainians were shocked. And they were really hurt by it. And it just revealed who she was. And of course, she's somebody that has been implicated in the whole corruption probe on Netanyahu as well, because it's a whole culture of corruption. And being the longest serving prime minister, like, he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go. He wants to stay. And he came to power on this whole genocidal movement, the one that assassinated Rabin. He promised his hardline supporters essentially genocide, and that's what they've been fanning the flames of. That's why Stephen Miller's and his cabinet stormed the mosques. That's why they expand the settlements in areas that are supposed to be Palestinian territory, like the West Bank. That is why we've had the deadliest years for Palestinians in recent years, including, of course, this year, including children under 8. And so he's wanted to amplify Hamas to get his war, to get his genocide. It's a prize. He's like, what we're seeing now, to us, what is horrifying to watch play out in all these videos online of children in shock. These living nightmares that we're watching helplessly, and just like screaming ceasefire, and our tax dollars paying for children to be in shock. I want to just tell everyone the reason why Gaza has such a young population, right? Why 50% of the population of Gaza is under 18, why it's so young, is because the adults have been killed. Like, so many adults have been killed. And so who's left to kill? Children. And that's being paid for with our tax dollars. What Netanyahu is doing is he's trying to finish them off. And by doing that, he's going to be a hero to all the people that brought him to power. That's the reality. So yes, he wanted this war. And I have no doubt, given how closely aligned he's been with Putin all this time and how much it benefits in ailing Putin in his war, that Putin at least was aware of this or had some blessing, and not Netanyahu was aware of this and had some blessing. I don't think this was simply an intelligence failure. Because here's all the safeguards that would have failed. You had Pegasus spyware, right? Like, Israel has Pegasus. You're telling me like Pegasus didn't pick up on this? That their whole system of Pegasus is essentially smoke and mirrors, worthless? That's reassuring to hear, but is that what you're saying? That, so Pegasus couldn't help them here? Okay, so, and then you have, one of the other reasons for the intelligence failure is you had a focus on the West Bank, where there's even a big military incursion there over the summer. They really moved all of their resources, including soldiers who should have been in those areas that were attacked by Hamas. They really moved them towards the West Bank. The West Bank was the focus. And then with all the uptick of violence against Palestinians, how the hell are your intelligence security forces supposed to cultivate and build trusting relationships with Palestinian sources that they need in order to collect the intelligence they need to protect the country, when you're blatantly killing and humiliating a record number of Palestinians on their own land? How are you going to cultivate sources for intelligence, right? So that's part of this intelligence failure. And so I think all of those things taken together, I think, yes, it was an intelligence failure, but it was one that Netanyahu's own personal ambition and his own larger, broader, genocidal, like, racist ambition all drove off of a cliff, and one that he's going to try to take full advantage of, which is why we have to raise our voices and demand a ceasefire, but also that he needs to go. He needs to go. Netanyahu needs to be pushed out. He needs to go now. And anybody, as they're saying, the Israelis in this moment of political chaos there, and there's many in the government even saying, oh, it's not a time to blame. It's not a time to point fingers. We'll deal with that after the war. No, you deal with that now, because the same people that got you into the war aren't going to be the ones who are going to end it. You cannot trust their leadership. You cannot trust them. They let this war happen. That means they have to go. Heads have to roll now. That's, you know, it's pretty common, especially in wartime, that you mix up your cabinet to you know, so things have to happen now. Changes have to be made now. Netanyahu has to go now. As of this recording on 10/19/2023, Netanyahu has yet to take any responsibility for this because he never will. He's a strong man. Okay? He wanted this war. He needs this war, he thinks, for his own survival and own political survival. And we cannot let that happen. Biden can be pushed. As dark as this moment is, and we'll go more into this in the public episode this week, Biden can be pushed. And so I think we just have to raise our voices for a ceasefire and raise our voices that Netanyahu has to go. If Ukraine can finally get its long-range missiles, there can finally be a ceasefire. Netanyahu can be pushed out. Jake Sullivan can be pushed, okay? So we're going to keep pushing these guys, and we're going to get the changes that we need there. We're going to protect Palestinian lives. We're going to make it plain, like, no to anti-Semitism, no violence, end the violence. Non-violent resistance is the only way to go. And we have to say plainly now that Palestinian lives matter. Palestinian lives matter. So we're going to go into all of these big, horrible breaking news stories coming out of the Middle East and the larger repercussions for all of us, and including, of course, Ukraine, in the public episode, and whatever hellfire should come out in the meantime between now and Tuesday. So thank you all for your questions. That is this week's big Q&A. There'll be more questions answered for next week. So if you're supporting the show, allowing this show to happen, investing in this, in independent journalism, if you're making this possible, thank you so much. Thank you so much to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to subscribers at the Democracy Defender level or higher, keep your questions coming. I always love hearing from you. And yeah, it means so much to me to hear what keeps you up at night, because it's always what keeps me up at night. And we're on the same page here. We're seeing the same things. And yes, it is all adding up to global corruption, which is very scary, but we're going to stop it. We're going to stop it. It's always going to be there. We're going to contain it. We're going to rebuild our power so we have a stronger fighting chance for a livable future. We're going to present an alternative, a livable alternative.